Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news. The Bloomberg Businessweek podcast with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec from Bloomberg Radio.
Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec live here in San Francisco at the Bloomberg Technology Summit. And fair to say, Carol, we've already heard from a great lineup of speakers. I mentioned Flo's Adam Newman, formerly of WeWork, Fei Li, they call her the godmother of AI, yeah. And she's also a professor. Heard from her a little earlier. Snap CEO Evan Spiegel, also here at this event. We got a great lineup.
It's really fun to see the networking going on. We've also got our own star, and we're talking about Brad Stone. He is the editor of Bloomberg Businessweek. He's also, of course, the author of numerous books, including those on Amazon, Amazon Unbound, and so much more, joining us here at the Bloomberg Tech Summit. Actually, you have invited us in, so thank you so much for that. First of all, I feel like there's so much going on, AI, yes, but tell us about, Brad, the conversations you guys had as a team about what you wanted to cover here.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. We do these every year, and we try not to repeat ourselves. And last year, we were really talking about the emergence of ChatGPT. It had gotten everybody talking. And so, of course, we had Sam Altman as our keynote speaker. And you can't invite the same people every year. But the other thing that's happened is it has started a movement. And so we thought, well, who else do we want? And the first names that sprung to mind are the founders of Anthropic, siblings, Dario and Daniela Amodei. They actually worked at OpenAI and spun out, maybe with an implicit objection to how OpenAI was being run. That's where we started the day, and it's really set the tone for the conversations today. You mentioned Fei Li, we have Vinod Khosla, Reid Hoffman coming later. Really, I think where we settled on was like, let's find some of the architects of this moment and ask them the hard questions about, are we really kind of comfortable where we're going, or is this an arms race that is propelling everyone forward just to win? And what does that mean?
So what does that mean? Because, if we think about where we were a year ago when everybody was playing with ChatGPT, GPT-4 had basically just come out a little over a year ago when you had the tech summit here. Where are we this year with the run-up in NVIDIA? You have Amazon investing in Anthropic. You have all the OpenAI drama that happened at the end of last year. Where are we when it comes to sort of like AI being in prime time this year?
Yes. I will answer with something that you will never hear on the stage downstairs.
Okay.
I don't know. We are in an age of remarkable, what I call AI ambiguity. There's so many things we don't know. So for example, Meta has open sourced the Llama 3 model. What does that mean for these other companies that have spent hundreds of millions, maybe soon billions, to train and operate a model? What does it mean that you can now get the technology for free? Will chatbots be a thing that we regularly use, or are they a novel expression of the technology and then they'll fade away? Are there lanes for startups outside of what all the big tech companies that have the resources are doing with AI? These are great questions. I actually don't think that anybody has the answer. I think that even when I think about social media explosion or on-demand apps fueled by the iPhone, that we sort of had a sense of where, okay, well, this is cool, and people will find it useful. And I just think everything from how we'll use it to what the economics will look like are still completely up in the air.
I love that you went there, because I do feel like we've all been agog, if you will, right, on NVIDIA and the chips and so on and so forth. Coming off of Milken, I just came, and people too even are like trying to assess where do we allocate the money going forward. So much of what I heard, Brad, was data centers, right, and infrastructure build out. Like people were still like, we haven't quite figured out the applications of AI. Going forward.
I think that's true. Where I'm sort of bullish, and let's use an example of the good old Bloomberg terminal, where you really need to know how to get information from the terminal, right? We know a whole lexicon, and that's pretty similar to other computer systems. They'll do what you tell them to do, and often you need to speak a particular language, maybe even coding. And what AI is, I think of it as like a new user interface where you can express yourself either with a voice command or a written command in a plain language and have it respond and have it do things for you. Yeah. I think that as like, and I think we're going to see at I/O next week with Google and WWDC with Apple, them baking it into their devices and basically creating a new way to use technology.
Is it too early to say, Brad, that we're in an era right now like we were with the web browser in the 90s, sort of the dawn of the internet? Tech bubble notwithstanding, but the idea that there was this new technology that fundamentally changed not just the way we live, but the way we interact with each other and the way that we spend money.
I'm going to go back to my handy AI ambiguity and say, I don't know. I mean, if this is the domain of only the biggest companies that can afford it and their proxies, like Anthropic, then maybe it isn't a giant sea that lifts all boats. Maybe this is going to be owned by 4 or 5 companies and governments around the world, and it will concentrate their power. The arrival of the web browser was the arrival of all sorts of entrepreneurial opportunity. To your point, we had a rise and then a crash and then a rise again. I don't think it's clear that this is ready, set, go for everyone. It's very expensive to run these models. They may be regulated, as Fei Li said earlier today. If you regulate them, you could create a powerful black market based on open source models. So all sorts of sort of unresolved issues. And I'm just not sure, despite the fact that you go to Y Combinator, any startup community here, and all you will see and hear about are AI startups. I'm just not sure how big the opportunity is going to be. We'll see.
Hey, Adam Newman, you think about cycles, right, in technology, and we're trying to still figure out, right, the AI cycle going forward. But what did you want to know, or what, Adam Newman, in terms of, you think about WeWork, how it was a cover of Bloomberg Businessweek, maybe several times, I can't remember.
Before Brad's time.
Yes.
Before Brad's time. But nonetheless,
well, it's a great story.
We talked so much about that company and where it was going, and obviously it's gone through its things. What did you want to know?
Well, first of all, I felt so privileged to be able to bring his particular brand of charismatic lunacy. That's, I don't mean in a harsh way.
No.
He's entertaining as heck. He exudes charisma. He's at it again. He's trying to buy WeWork out of bankruptcy.
Right.
So that was the first topic. They've not taken his bid, and he was clearly signaling that he's going to appeal. That they think that the creditors should have looked at his bid more carefully, that he had the higher bid. He said that the current creditors who won the deal are making promises they can't keep. So that was the first topic. Then we asked about Flow, his residential real estate company. This idea of spending hundreds of millions of dollars to acquire properties and then not just be a landlord, but to use technology to create community and a sense of belonging. It's Adam bringing his classic sense of, quasi-mysticism into the world of business. And I was like, why do you keep doing that?
It sounds a lot like WeWork.
Yeah, why do you keep doing that, But it's who he is, and he's somebody who speaks from the heart. I asked him a little bit. I wanted to know about whether he was different. And I really do get the sense that, one, he's got a confrontational board now that's going to say no to him. He didn't have that before. And that, two, there's
a couple adults in the board.
Well, there were before, but maybe they weren't acting like it. And that he even said that on his latest proposal, Mark Andreessen told him no. So that's interesting. I'm not sure Masayoshi-san ever told him no. And then the third thing was I wanted to know from him how he was different as a CEO. And he mentioned the board, and he also mentioned advice that Jeff Bezos had given him to always talk last in a meeting, because otherwise you're going to kind of pollute the water and sway people's opinion. And I said, are you able to follow that advice? He goes, well. And his CFO was sitting in the audience and gave us a kind of half-hearted thumbs up. So maybe something to work on.
So do you see him pulling off the WeWork out of bankruptcy?
I don't know if he will win that deal. I think that the creditors are required, and it is in their personal interest to get the most money for the debt that exists and to bring the company out of the bankruptcy. And the fact that they've chosen this other path suggests to me, and I haven't really looked at it, but that it may be a more complicated picture that Adam has presented, and that it may not only be about a popularity contest. And I also asked him to explain to me why WeWork should be in Flow, and whether it was just a personal mission of redemption. And I wasn't sure I really fully believed that those two companies belong together, and that it wasn't a little emotional for him. In fact, he said that it was.
Yeah.
So, and maybe there are personal reasons. The question that they don't want to resell WeWork to Adam Neumann. We can all imagine what they are. He wasn't. The company had problems under his leadership, and the question is, are those personal reasons, do they meet a valid legal test?
It's fascinating if you think about the pandemic and how we're rethinking how we work and what kind of office space is ultimately needed. Like his thinking about this concept of having flexible workspace, like as you need it, wasn't so far-fetched. It's just timing and maybe execution. And
I would say this. I think that the history of real estate is Donald Trump as Exhibit A is a history of ups and downs, bubbles and crashes. We're seeing it in China right now. Businessweek, we did a list of all the billionaires that have lost everything betting on the Chinese. So that's no different. The difference is he wrote it a little higher, wrapped in a mantle of being a technology company and trying to take it public as a tech company, and then wrote it even lower because investors ultimately didn't buy the vision.
Can we talk about Amica?
Well, it's a humanoid robot.
I am obsessed.
Yes. This is a humanoid robot developed by Engineered Arts, a company in Cornwall, England. I'm about to go in either a career high or a career low.
You're good with this
I'm
kind
going
of
to go
stuff.
on stage and interview the robot.
So it's going to answer your questions in real time.
Yes. Yeah. It's creepily human-like. It speaks, and I presume should be addressed as a female. That's a choice. It's really remarkably, I wouldn't say it's lifelike, but because I did some tests, it's expressive, and it's designed to make people feel comfortable with it. To me, even though it's a British project, it very much reminds me of the Japanese bipedal robots of the past, and Sony and Samsung, and they were always working on them. The Japanese love their bipedal robots.
It's certainly it's an incredible novelty, but we should note that there are lots of companies working on robots like this to help in warehouses. Think about what it would do to a company like Amazon to be able to have pickers.
This Amica, I hope at least, does not move. Because if you see me running across the stage, that's fine, but I don't know that it's an ambulatory.
Not yet.
Now, I did ask, and it's running ChatGPT 4 Turbo.
Right.
So I think that's interesting.
So explain what that means.
That it's
EOS essentially.
Yeah, that Engineered Arts has developed the machine, but the brains are borrowed using the API of OpenAI and ChatGPT. Well, that's interesting going forward. That maybe robot makers don't need to worry as much about main general intelligence, but they could hook into one of these large models, use the API, and they can be more engineering companies that think about things like how the joints work, how balance works. As you mentioned, Carol, the expressiveness of the robot.
So wait, does that mean she's not connected to the cloud right now?
Oh, I would imagine that she is.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if Wi-Fi goes down.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
But she doesn't answer.
Just make sure she's on the right network, okay?
Exactly.
I was thinking, Tim and I were talking about the hotel we're staying. We're not going to say where it is, but it's like, right, we couldn't get anybody to answer the call. So we could have used Amica to answer our phone call and help us answer some questions.
There is the RSA conference happening here in San Francisco right now, which is huge.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's you wouldn't need Amica to do that. You would need an Alexa or a ChatGPT.
Right.
And then robots can just be these physical things. And the question is, do we really need a bipedal robot that's trying to trick us into thinking that it's human? Or will they be, Tim, you mentioned industrial robots, little things that do very specific tasks, deliver the mail, deliver packages, that kind of thing.
Hey, can I ask you what's the biggest, I don't know, I know AI, as you go through today, what, are you looking for a question to be answered or something? I think you know so much this world. Is there something top of mind for you?
I think we all want to know where it's going. I guess specifically, we've seen since the September of 2022, every successive model of ChatGPT or any of these other chatbots has been step change improvements fed by more and more data and more processing power and money running on NVIDIA chips. So my question is that going to continue? or are we hitting a natural limit, either in the money that we could spend to train the available processors,
Right.
or just the model maxes out,
All right.
and it's not giving us step change improvements anymore.
Good stuff from Brad Stone as always. We've got more, including we're going to continue with AI, folks. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Silicon Valley, no question, buzzing about AI. We've been talking about it. But venture capital deal making, Carol, it's still suppressed. I got some stats here. Here's some numbers, okay?
Yeah.
Here in the US, VCs poured $36.6 billion into startups in the first quarter of the year. That's according to PitchBook. The funding went to 2,800 companies. On both measures, it's a nearly 30% decrease compared with the same period in 2023. So the takeaway is startups had their worst funding year last year since 2019. This year, it's starting off even worse. So despite all the excitement.
Well, we've got a great voice to really talk to us about the startup community. Aileen Lee is with us. She's the founder and managing partner of the VC firm Cowboy Ventures. They invest mostly in software companies based here in the US. And we should say that her firm has made more than 100 early stage investments, specializing in seed rounds. She's on site with us. The other thing is she has done the data analysis that is the reason we use the word unicorn when it comes to startups. We love data here at Bloomberg. How are you?
I am so happy to be here.
Well, tell us about the VC world. Give us an idea. It's a great indicator in terms of the health of the economy.
Yep, so we just finished a panel, myself, Kirsten Green, and Ade from Base 10 with Tom Giles, who's the tech editor for Bloomberg Tech,
Right.
and we talked about what's going on. So, like you mentioned, we had a big slowdown last year. A lot of people put their pencils down. They're both, it felt like there was a falling knife in terms of public markets, which obviously affects the private markets. And so people said it's not a great time to be investing in private companies. I do think that we're seeing quite a pickup this year, but it's largely driven by AI, which is great. It's very exciting. It is the new hotness in venture capital. So you just have to, it can be quite treacherous, I think, to invest in AI right now because it's, obviously there's a lot of energy right now. We're kind of in a consolidation phase, for very good reasons, right? Whether it's Microsoft or Meta or Salesforce or ServiceNow or Google, you need a lot of, and OpenAI, you need a lot of money, you need a lot of GPU, you need a lot of engineers, and so there's kind of this tectonic plate war going on in the big tech players right now. And so if you've got a really big fund, you could try and align obviously most of these companies are public companies, right? So it's a great time for NVIDIA, AMD to be a public markets investor, to be able to get exposure to the AI that is going to be powering, I think, most applications for decades to come. But for private markets, I think there's just a lot of money going into startups, many of whom are not going to make it.
So the thing that's interesting about this, and Brad kind of alluded to it when we were talking to him, is the idea of it's so expensive to have this processing power, to buy these GPUs.
Yeah.
And it's not as easy as 10, 15 years ago, creating an app and building a network, which was sort of what we saw venture capital support in that generation.
Yeah.
Is there a concern that you do early stage investing, you do seed startups, seed investing? Is there a concern that these companies just can't raise the capital in order to support that?
So there are large models that the big technology companies are investing in that have billions of parameters that you need billions of dollars for GPUs. We have been investing at Cowboy Ventures. As you mentioned, we're seed stage investors. Actually, our first AI-driven enterprise software company we invested 8 years ago, where they use what we call small model, where they don't need to buy GPUs. They basically get a proprietary data set. In that case, the company's called Textio, and we basically got HR-related documents, job specs, performance reviews, and we train the AI using very situational specific parameters to basically understand how it could help people write performance reviews more effectively, how it can help people write job specs more effectively, and you just don't need the giant GPU to be able to do that work. And then also a lot of it is around how you solve the problem for everyday business users. Instead of them using Google Docs or Word, you need to figure out how would I get into their workflow, whether it's through Workday or Lattice, and how do I actually create those integrations so that the way that the AI can be in the business process of everyday people inside the enterprise. And so I think that's those kinds of business or industry-specific applications, you don't need billions of dollars to build those applications.
But is that scalable? Like I'm listening to you. Is that scalable elsewhere?
Elsewhere meaning
other industries, like that model.
Completely. So we're seeing, I think, a lot of there's the application layer and there's infrastructure, right? So there's money going into both. At the application layer, that's where a lot of VC funds are playing right now. So and it makes a lot of sense because so many people in whether it's the food and beverage industry, in hospitals, in education, people are still using pen, paper, spreadsheets. They're not actually leveraging the underlying data, and the applications they use every day are not smart. And so I think there's pretty much every industry and every application that we look at today is going to have new applications that are powered by AI. So it is a tremendous opportunity.
Okay, speaking of opportunities, I'm wondering what's more difficult in this world where cash can earn 4.5% to 5% in T-bills, okay? That's an opportunity.
Yeah.
What's harder right now? Is it harder to go raise money from investors to then deploy?
Yeah.
Or is it harder to find the companies to deploy that money into?
We're very fortunate. We're a pretty disciplined fund. We've been around for over 10 years now. We've had pretty much the same investors, or what we call LP limited partners, for pretty much the 10 years. So we're very fortunate, and they are savvy investors who understand the upside of investing in venture capital firms, and they know it's a 10 to 15-year investment. So fortunately for us, it has definitely gotten harder, and I think in many ways it's good because it holds us very accountable. Is like there are benchmarks that you have to beat to be worth investing in, and that's our job, is to make sure that we beat those benchmarks fund after fund. And also we raise every 3 years or every 4 years. So you raise the fund and then you have 3 years to basically go find some great investments. So it's gotten quite competitive in private markets. A ton of money flooded in 2020, 2021, and it's probably not going to recede. And so there's just more money chasing private companies than ever.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Aileen, is with all the attention on AI, what's being neglected maybe in the venture world, or where do you think we should also be thinking about when it comes to tech innovation?
I do think, that's a really good question. I think the big boom when interest rates were basically zero in 2020 and 2021, it brought so much attention to the venture capital and technology world that actually what we would have considered long tail markets, parking garages, like companies selling software to parking garages got funded. Like the unicorn analysis that we did in 2013 versus 2023 showed a huge difference in the amount of money that's going to industry-specific software. So in the original unicorn analysis in 2013, it's quite interesting how it flip-flopped. It was 80% consumer companies and 20% enterprise software companies. 10 years later, it flip-flopped and it became 80% enterprise, 20% consumer. And in those enterprise, you've got climate tech companies, you've got agriculture companies, you've got companies serving parking garages. So entrepreneurs, especially I think since the iPhone debuted in 2007, pretty much everyone in the modern world understands the power of technology. And so if they work in a port, if they work at a nursing station, they understand how much inefficiency there is and how much opportunity there is for technology to actually reinvent the way they do things and let humans do what they do best better.
Still waiting for healthcare to really embrace technology in a big way.
Keep waiting.
Give you a chip with all my information. I'm ready to do that. I actually am.
If you need a copy of the X-ray, here's a CD-ROM for you. I'm not joking.
Earlier today, actually.
That's still the way it works.
I know we have like 10 seconds. Vinod Khosla speak earlier today with Emily Chang, and he was saying that the thing that he's going to tell President Biden tomorrow is that every person should have a personal doctor, and every kid should have a personal tutor, and that would reinvent both education and healthcare, and it would be amazing.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 2 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Well, Cake Ventures is a pre-seed and seed venture capital firm. It focuses on investing in demographic changes that are driven by tomorrow's internet users. So what that means as far as where they put their money. There's a company out there called Rares where you can invest in sneakers and collectibles. Bright, it's an AI-powered workforce training platform. And then it comes to behavioral health. The platform is called Most Days. That's among other investments that they've made.
I love the idea of demographics. I really think it's you kind of figure out what are the trends, not only of today, but really more importantly of tomorrow. With us right now is Monique Woodward. She's founding partner, managing partner at Cake Ventures. Welcome, welcome. So nice to be talking with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
When you think about demographics, right, you can dice and slice it, Monique, so many different ways. What are the demographics that you really like to focus on in today's environment?
So the Cake Ventures thesis around demographics is really based on a few different layers. The first layer is aging and longevity. There's 10,000 people turning 65 every single day in this country alone. And there's this massive opportunity to help them use technology to make their lives better as they age. Second layer of the cake is the increased spending power of women and how the female dollar drives companies to billion-dollar plus outcomes. And then the third is the shift to majority-minority, where people of color as a broad group, primarily Latino, Asian, and Black, become a majority in the United States and are already a global majority.
You know, it's really fascinating. I keep talking about this. I was just back from Milken, and I had to moderate a panel, and it was called Thriving in Disruption.
You did several panels, I will point out.
But what was interesting in our prep call, so here I have somebody from real estate, from venture, private equity guy, private credit guy, somebody who's in trading every day on a platform over at Citadel Securities, and what they wanted to talk about was longevity and the aspect of how it's going to impact things like pension obligations, how we live, the kind of housing we need, whether we bring older people back into the workforce. What are the important conversations that you think we need to be thinking about when it comes to longevity and how that shapes specifically your investments?
I think the big conversation right now is around how do we live longer, right? But I think that's just touching the surface of longevity. It's really about how do we use technology to give people better lives at older ages as they get older, right? How do we use technology to enhance their lives, help them age in place without moving into a nursing home or retirement home? And how do we give them better lives after 60 as they had when they were in their 20s and 30s?
I'm wondering about the third theme that you touched on in terms of demographics, the idea of investments in companies that are not necessarily geared toward people of color, but take this demographic into account. Here we are in Silicon Valley, not necessarily the most diverse place when it comes to where venture capital is deployed. I think that's fair to say. How do you think about that in terms of where you're putting your money, in terms of the opportunities that are out there? Because I think a big criticism that folks have about venture capitalists is, they're always just trying to solve problems that they have.
It's true.
How do we get to Tahoe faster, right? to get a ski day in.
Ouch.
I'm not trying to be dismissive, but I mean, it's like,
True.
That's
you're
a
right.
common criticism.
So one of the categories that I do a lot of investing in is the future of deskless work. 80% of the labor market is actually deskless work, non-office work that doesn't happen in an office, healthcare jobs, construction jobs, service worker jobs. As you might expect, a lot of these jobs over-index in women and people of color. And so I think that AI and new technologies are going to be really important in accelerating the adoption of those jobs, but also accelerating the efficiency of those jobs. And so I think we're at this really important inflection point where we can use technology to improve the lives of healthcare workers, improve the lives of service workers. And we haven't been doing it because, to your point, a lot of the people who have been building technology, they come from a knowledge worker background. So their immediate thought is to build future work products, software for knowledge workers. But these massive opportunities that happen in healthcare, in construction, in manufacturing, and those jobs are often held by people of color.
I'm watching Brad Stone up on stage with Amica, the robot, and I'm thinking about in terms of healthcare, like whether or not there is some way. I mean, one of the other trends that came out of Milken is that there's shortage of healthcare workers in particular. And I do wonder, is there some way in technology innovation that we can assist those folks who actually have to do things and care for people, or whether, because we're facing shortages in a big way in that industry?
Well, we're already seeing it in companies like A Bridge, which raises Series C in order to use the conversations between healthcare workers and their patients and convert them into usable data. So we're already seeing AI being really useful in the lives of healthcare workers.
Right.
I'm very skeptical about the use of robotics in actual patient to healthcare worker interactions, but I do think that AI is useful in freeing up the job of the healthcare worker in order to make those patient interactions much more robust, much more, have a lot more depth. And so I think we're far away from robots doing that job, but I think we're in the AI doing that job.
I guess also maybe cut down on error too. When you're talking to a doc, I mean, this is something I recently noticed. When you're trying to describe like a pain that you're having to a doctor or some sort of symptoms, I mean, they're essentially serving the function of AI. What they're doing is, they're saying, okay, well, you have this, this, and this.
Right.
Here's your family history.
Filtering
They're taking
through.
all these data points and they're trying to diagnose you with something that you have. It's so easy to see how that could be better served by something in the cloud.
Exactly.
Or at least augmented in some way.
Augmented.
Not the interaction
I think that's what we're looking for within healthcare in particular. We are looking for technology to augment the already great skills that these nurses, nurse practitioners, and doctors already have. We're not looking to replace them with robots, but give them additional tools that make their jobs more efficient and allow them to spend more of that one-on-one time with patients.
The whole idea of adjacent, right, in terms of AI. Monique, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming by.
Thank you so much for having me.
Some time with our audience.
Thanks a lot.
Monique Woodward, she is founding partner and managing partner at Cake Ventures, joining us here at the Bloomberg Technology Summit. But these are some of the discussions and technologies, like figuring out what does it mean for our workplace. I mean, you and I kind of joke about it, kid about it, but if we could get an assistant kind of writing our scripts on a daily basis, I wouldn't mind that.
I was thinking about that a lot yesterday.
I did get an assist.
When I was
His
working.
name was Tim
But to be
Stenovec.
fair, I mean, you were literally, 10 hours of sleep in the past 4 days because of what you were doing. But the truth is, there are a lot of repetitive tasks out there.
Yeah.
It would be great to see some of those be replaced by machines so people. Look, I oftentimes think about this conversation in the context of other big historical shifts when it comes to the types of work that people did 100 years ago versus
Right.
the type of work we're doing now, right? We don't need a horse and buggy to get us from place to place, so what was replaced, and what did that allow people to do? What did the steam engine allow people to do? Does this thing stick the way that, the proponents of it
I'm not
say
even
it
going
will?
to go back that far. I think about when I started out in journalism, when I needed research, I was on the phone with folks in the government, like Commerce Department, can you FedEx overnight or send me research
Really?
for my reports?
Like not emailing it to you.
Not even necessarily
Not attaching
email.
a PDF.
It's amazing the stuff that I used to get in the mail. And now I just go on the internet and I just pull it right up. So you just think about that transition. It's made my job a lot easier. And I do feel like that access to information is freeing. How incredible that is. That's something Elon talked about. He was talking up Starlink, but he said that's the great leveler in terms of creating internet access to everybody around the world. That means everybody can get an education. MIT, find their courses online, like you think about things like that. But I feel like with this next level of AI, I'm not quite so sure, but it could be pretty cool.
Those are the good things that
Those are
can
the good
happen.
things.
We think, and that was the promise of the internet. But look at the internet's also been used for a lot of really bad stuff. I mean, we had the cover of Bloomberg Businessweek recently,
Right.
Talking about the way that social media platforms are becoming places where teenage boys essentially have been held hostage, and it's led to some really disturbing outcomes.
All right, well-
Again, all as a result of the internet.
All right, so two sides to every coin, and this is what we want to get into because here at the Bloomberg Technology Summit, there's a workshop going on. It's called Addressing AI Risks in Business, and we have a great voice to talk to us about that. Anthony Aguirre is Executive Director of the Future of Life Institute, joining us on site. Thank you so much for coming by with us. We are trying to figure out technology, AI, what it means for our workplace, for our life in general. What are some of the biggest facets of that discussion or narrative that kind of occupy your mind today?
I think there are some major challenges that we have that AI is presenting us with. One is the issue of how are we going to make AI in a way that is actually safe and beneficial for society. Right now, we have AI systems that are being developed by sort of a handful of very large companies, and they're doing it in a very competitive way. So each of those companies feels like it has to develop the new, better system faster than its rivals does. We even see this on the international stage where the US has rhetoric like we have to develop AI faster than our geopolitical rivals. And this is not the way...
It's a race. It's a real race.
It's a race. And a race is not the way you get something to go as safely as possible, right? The race is the way that you get things to go as quickly as possible, and speed does not necessarily equal safety. So I think one of the problems that we have to step out of this dynamic of there's a competitive race to develop more and more powerful systems, even at the expense of making sure that those systems are safe and beneficial for society. So that's issue one, I would say.
What's at stake here if those guardrails aren't in place?
I think,
like, what's worst case scenario? Just give it to us cold, man.
I think there are short-term scenarios that we see that are worrisome and long-term ones. So I think in the short term, we see that our whole sort of information gathering and understanding and dissemination system, the ecosphere, is more or less being dismantled. Right now we are becoming awash in AI-generated content. You don't really know most of the things that you read, whether they're AI-generated or human-generated. We will soon be at the point where the pictures that you see are more or less indistinguishable between AI-generated and camera-generated. That's already sort of possible. So we have a kind of pollution of our information commons to the extent that I think we're losing track of just what is real, what is human, what is true from what isn't. And so I think that's a challenge we're going to see play out in huge
That's happening now.
That's happening now.
I mean, that's not the robots taking over. That's
right.
It's not the robots taking over, but it also isn't. It's also not the robots taking over in the sense that we are replacing human-generated culture and content with AI-generated culture and content.
How do you police that? How do you create the guardrails around that?
I think so in terms of the content generation, it's a question of having ways to verify that something is authentic, that is real, that is true, that is human-generated, ways to detect and ways to label things that aren't, and having the technical systems that allow people to access that information. So it should be the case that if I go online and read a news article, I should know whether it's AI written or not. I should know whether a fact in it is true, and if it's claimed to be true, how do I know that it's true? I should be able to go back to the camera that took that picture.
How do you do that?
Well,
it's all possible technically. I need the social systems and the rules and the market demand to bring those things into the way we actually
use automation at Bloomberg. Bloomberg
and that's
News,
always noted.
And it's noted at the top.
Yeah.
It says this article was written with the assistance of Bloomberg Automation. I mean, not everybody does that though, I guess.
Right. So
should there be a rule, a law?
Of course. I mean, there should certainly be certain rules about fake information. So I think it should not be legal to generate non-consensual deepfakes of people that they didn't authorize, whether they're sexual deepfakes or political deepfakes or fraudulent business, deepfakes.
Are you talking to politicians right now to make this a reality?
We are, yeah. So there are lots of bills in Congress that are pursuing the deepfakes issue. I think some of them are underpowered in the sense that they predominantly put the onus on content creators not to create deepfakes, but they don't put the onus on developers not to create the tools for deepfakes, and not necessarily enough on platforms to make sure that they label things correctly. So I think we need lots of things. Some of those will happen by themselves because the market will require it. Some of them will be required. We will need regulations and laws for it.
I'm just kind of a little terrified thinking about social media and the amount of news information that's not accurate, that's already out there, and we've not done a great job policing that. So I'm crossing my fingers, crossing everything.
We need to do a little better this time. We need to do a little better.
Maybe we've learned.
We'll see. We'll check in with you in a little while and see if we've done a better job.
But the broader question, so you asked about the long term and the short term.
So we'll see. We'll see if we can pull it off. All right, Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. That's Anthony Aguirre, Executive Director of the Future of Life Institute here at the Bloomberg Tech Summit.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Well, our next guest needs no introduction, but we're going to give him one anyway. He's a Silicon Valley legend. He helped build PayPal, co-founded LinkedIn. He was an early investor in Facebook and Airbnb. He was the first investor in OpenAI. He co-founded the AI company Inflection AI. He's on Microsoft's board. He's a partner at the VC firm Greylock Partners. He's a New York Times bestselling author. And he's also a podcaster. We have Reid with us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
How are you?
He's the GOAT.
Although, as we were just talking, it's the loudest environment we've ever done a radio show before, so hopefully it'll work.
It's working so far. So far, so good. But I have to ask you, Are you the real Reid? Or am I talking to some sort of AI digital twin right now?
Well,
and explain why I have to ask that question, please.
So as you know, I did an interview with myself where I was talking to my own digital twin, Reid AI, and I did it in order to kind of show that not only, obviously there's a whole bunch of concerns. There's concerns in political and misinformation and deep fakes and a bunch of other stuff that are real concerns. But even here, there's optimism to look at. Like, what can we shape towards? And I wanted to show, not just tell, on that message. And so it's like, okay, well, let me talk to my own Reid AI and see how it works. And the reason why you asked that question, of course, is because you say, well, wait a minute, that was pretty good. Of course, we're here in person. You can tell I'm the real me.
This is Reid AI that sounded like you. This looked like you.
Yes.
Yeah, this is like, it looked like you were talking to an
video, audio, and the words were all AI generated. There was zero from me. It was, well, other than mirroring off my earlier videos, mirroring off my earlier podcasts.
It used your book to train as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it used everything I've written to give answers the way Reid would give answers.
So are we all going to have digital twins someday and we're going to utilize them? Or what's
can my digital twin go to the DMV for me?
Hallelujah.
So I think we might. It's certainly possible. Certainly if you're a media person, you'll have a digital twin. Certainly if you're a leader, you'll have a digital twin. Because it'll be used in everyone. If you're a lawyer, you'll have one, because then people can talk to your digital twin at maybe at a cheaper rate than talking to you, or prepping for your meeting, or that kind of stuff. So I think there will be a stack of areas for digital twins that will be very real. But I'm not sure all 8 billion people in the world will do it.
Well, so why should this excite us and not scare us and want us to all move to bunkers?
So it should, look, naturally, it should both excite and scare us. The scare us is the negative uses. The scare us is political misinformation, things that are going to be happening this year in the US and so forth, and in other major elections and democracies. It should scare us because there's questions around, well, wait a minute, what if someone created a deep fake of me doing something or saying something I really abhorred? I think Trump is a corruption in democracy against the rule of law, and what happens if you create a deep fake of me going, I love Trump? That would be obviously a problem. And so there's all kinds of ways that there are real problems. On the other hand, we will, as we always do with technology, figure out how to navigate, again, not perfectly, but sufficiently, and there will be great things. Like, for example, that's part of the reason I started showing hey, look, here I'm making a deep fake of myself, and it's not that bad.
Reid, when you sat down, I said the conversations we have a lot at Bloomberg, and we've written about this, is here you have LinkedIn, kind of the social media site, the social media site that seems to be clean, pure, you can trust, and you can have civil conversations, so we can get it right. So how is that kind of a guiding force in terms of Gen AI, and how we need to think about what are the guardrails, how do we regulate it?
Yeah. So the good news is that mostly frontier model companies, Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, are all putting a lot of energy into making these models healthy participants within the US, within the global kind of media ecosystem. Like, don't generate fake information, be civil, don't do hate speech, don't enable self-harm. They all put a lot of energy and a lot of work in that, and invest hundreds of millions of dollars and teams of hundreds of people in order to do that. Now, one of the challenges is that some of these models are open sourced, and as open source, someone else takes the open source model to something that's not any of that with that. Right. And that's part of the reason why we still have to navigate this.
Do you have trust, though, that we can navigate it correctly and safely in the future? AI?
So the ultimate answer is absolutely yes.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that there aren't potholes, bumps in the road, fender scrapes, all the rest. I guarantee you there will be those too.
The U.S. can't get Vladimir Putin not to invade Ukraine. The world can't get him not to stop fighting there. What convinces you that we could get a leader like him not to use AI for bad?
0%. Like, if you said that Putin will be using AI to disrupt the U.S. elections, probably support Trump because that's his exit strategy from Ukraine. He will do that. 100%, there's no way of stopping it. The defense is not getting him not to do it. The defense is integrating AI into our own tech platforms and using our stronger AI in defense.
So essentially saying, okay, well, maybe you see something on Facebook and Meta platforms might have developed something that says, okay, well, this isn't necessarily something that's true.
Yes.
A disclaimer of sorts,
but do you trust Facebook to do that?
Actually,
there's been some issues so far,
Yes. So,
and you have a deep history with the company.
Yes, I have a deep history with the company. I actually have talked to Zuckerberg about it. They're investing in it. I think they're making a real effort at it. So I think they're really trying. I'm more worried about Twitter than I am about Facebook on this matter.
Okay, why are you more worried about Twitter?
Well, because look,
Elon Musk, someone you also go way back with.
Yeah, and look, Elon is literally one of the heroes of our generation. Space and kind of Starlink and Tesla and EV, just amazing. We wouldn't have any of this without him. It is so spectacular. On the other hand, before he buys Twitter, he's like, oh, we have this problem with robots. And then after he bought, before trying to get out of the deal, and then after he buys, oh, what robots? And you're like, well, the robots are still there. There's still Internet Research Agency, Russian robot farms doing shit. Are you doing anything about them? I'm not hearing anything.
To be fair, I did see an ad on Twitter recently with a deep fake of Jeff Bezos pushing a cryptocurrency.
Yes.
And it's a paid ad that has showed up repeatedly in my feed. Obviously not approved by Bezos.
Yeah. And so therefore, what are you doing about AI and robots?
Well, Elon is so complex. Back from Milken, he did a conversation with Michael Milken. He said very important to have maximum truth-seeking AI and maximum curious AI, and that it's taught not to lie nor do things that are not true.
Yeah. Well, walk the walk, don't just talk the talk.
Well said, well said. Can I ask, I'm always curious, as we have all these conversations about Gen AI, how is it going to impact my life? How is it really going to impact Tim's life? How is it really going to impact your life?
So here's a simple way of looking at it. All of us are going to have a personal AI assistant that is going to be helping us with its focus on us, right? So it'll be like, hey, what do you need help with? Do you need help with figuring out, say, something light, like where to go, what entertaining to do, in the city tonight? Or, I'm trying to figure out this thing with my kid. Oh, we can help you with that. Oh, I'm trying to figure out this medical thing. Oh, I can help you with that. Oh, I'm trying to figure out, I had this difficult conversation with a coworker. Oh, I'll talk to you about that. It will help us with a whole range of things. And for example, part of what we found at Inflection was really surprising to us and very positive, which has Pi in personal intelligence, is people will say, oh, I got these 8 ingredients in my fridge. What should I make? Or, my toaster broke. Can I fix it? And you're like, actually, in fact, it helps with all of that. So it's that human amplification that's helping us navigate our lives, which is the thing I guarantee will be there.
I love the ingredients in the fridge part of it. Hey, if you're just joining us, we're speaking with Reid Hoffman of PayPal, of LinkedIn, of OpenAI, of Inflection AI, of the podcast Possible. The list certainly goes on. Reid, I'm wondering about winners and losers when it comes to AI in terms of companies. You're on the board of Microsoft. I mentioned a couple of the big companies that you've invested in, that you founded. Is there a concern that we're just going to see the big companies like Microsoft, like NVIDIA, like Amazon, like Meta platforms, they're going to be the only winners when it comes to AI?
What I guarantee you is they're not going to be the only winners. They will be winners, right? Satya has just done a masterful job. Remember, it started with a $1 billion deal with a 501c3. I think it's the first time in the history that something like that's happened. Genius strategy from Satya, and I think it will be across all of these companies. I think they will have strong wins going into the future. On the other hand, at Greylock, we're investing in a whole bunch of AI companies. We do it reasonably well. We have a whole portfolio that we're excited about. And I think that it's just you don't play the same game. It's a little bit like if you said, hey, I've got a startup. I'm going to try to make a new desktop search company. You're like, well, that's kind of difficult, right? There is this company called Google. It's a little challenging.
Doing okay.
Or I'm going to make a new handset mobile phone device. You're like, there's this company called Apple. It's a little challenging. So, you don't do it that way, but there's going to be a whole range of other AI companies. Things that will, like everything from opportunities that the large tech companies just can't focus on, to taking interesting risks, to making that risk look good, and then all of a sudden building out into different companies. So I think there's going to be a range of startups that will excite and delight us.
We love podcasts. We have a great podcast. You have a great new podcast. Tell us about Possible.
Thank you very much.
Well, tell us about it. Like, who you want to talk to? What are the conversations you want to have?
So for me, with Possible, it's too much of the dialogue is about technology being dangerous to us. How we evolve as humanity, how we become better and more human is through technology. It's clothing, it's glasses, it's food, it's cooking, it's fire, it's buildings. All of this is technology that's helped us make us as the human beings we are. AI will be the same, and the whole point of on the Possible podcast is to say, this is how technology can help us become more human. Not to go, oh my God, what's coming in technology? It can be great for us, and it's not that hard to shape. We just need to shape it. Whether it's AI, whether it's the use of phones, and obviously people like to talk about what social networks, and they go, wow, like that's been kind of challenging. It's like, well, look at LinkedIn. LinkedIn's worked out pretty well. It's doable. So let's do it.
Reid, I want to end with something that everybody loves to talk about, politics.
We all agree, as you know.
Look, you've been open about your feelings about Donald Trump. You helped fund E. Jean Carroll's defamation lawsuit against the former president. There are a lot of business leaders out there, some of them people you work with very closely, who say that business under a President Trump administration was better than business under a Biden administration. And that's why we're in the corner of Donald Trump when it comes to 2024. What do you say to them?
So I understand the approach that Trump is more regulatory lightweight than Biden. And by the way, generally speaking, being more regulatory lightweight is a good thing. I try to encourage the Biden administration to do that. On the other hand, what's more fundamental is the rule of law. Business works much, much better with a healthy, strong rule of law. We do not want to have leaders who are literally in a court, like have been convicted by a court of you were slandering about your sexual assault, and a jury found you guilty, right? We should be a rule of law country first. And by the way, this is what the business leaders, by the way, rule of law is what makes great business. That's the reason why actually Biden is a better president for business, even though the regulatory thing won't be exactly what you want, and we'll have to work on it, but rule of law is fundamental.
And to be fair, your perspective, your point of view.
Yes, mine, yes.
But I do wonder that, so as you look at the November election, that outcome, if it is not another Biden White House, if it's President Trump, former President Trump back in the White House, what does it mean for the tech industry or your view in terms of if the rule of law is not followed?
Well, so look, I think the tech industry can thrive under either administration. But I do think that if
they've lived through a Trump White House
either
before.
Biden or Trump. But if I think Trump's elected, I think history will look back as the beginning of the end of the American world order. And that will have a massive effect on global business.
How far are you willing to go to re-elect Joe Biden?
Well, I'm willing to invest. I'm willing to speak. I'm willing to campaign. I'm willing to try to, when a prominent business leader speaks up and says, I'm pro-Trump, I call them. And I say, let's talk about it.
Do you ever change their mind?
Oh, of course. Look, for example, one of the things you have to do is think about blind spots. Like, I just said something that was positive about how Trump's administration was running. Like, It's right to say, you want a new regulation? Remove an old one. It's an exactly right thing.
But I think what you said about globally, the perception of the rest of the world, potentially, and what the U.S. means and what it is in terms of doing business, that's a bigger story.
People will not trust us. They will say, you now no longer trust that you're into the rule of law, an equal system, all the rest.
All right, if we weren't in a world where Gen AI was everything, 20 seconds, what's the other technology we should have on our radar, real quickly?
Well, so the other thing that's following behind it is synthetic biology, and when you put them together, by the way, like the invention of new pharmaceuticals, new medicines, everything else, it's like, let's just hold on to get to the future, because the future can be so amazing.
You do think about what AI can do, right, in terms of playing around with molecules. Thank you so much.
A pleasure.
Thank you for enduring.
My pleasure.
I so appreciate it. Reid, thank you so much.
That's Reid Hoffman of PayPal,
Here's a goat.
of LinkedIn,
Here's a goat.
a Silicon Valley legend.
Here's a
think it's
Silicon
fair to
Valley
say.
Goat. Can we say that?
New York Times bestselling author. His podcast,
Possible.
The Possible Podcast, season 2 started. It's out now.
Love it, love it. All right, folks, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Businessweek. We're live at the Bloomberg Technology Summit in San Francisco.
This is the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.